So basically, the first part is really like an overview and terminology and trying to set the stage for everything that we're going to hear in the next couple of parts. All right, with that, let's get going. Part one. So we're going to start with the basics. So this is going to assume that you may not know about all these things. Some of this may be a repeat to some of you, but what are notifications? Very simply put, it's a message or alert from the PeopleSoft application. And there's a variety of different notifications that you can see on the right-hand side, from a tile to the notification panel, a text message, an email, etc. These are just some of the different types of notifications that we have in the application. And with those notifications, there's a variety of different ways that you can get them. They can be on-screen messages, like our warning and error messages, alerts on a tile. So maybe we send an alert to be displayed on a tile. Work lists, those are the action items that someone needs to perform in the application. An email, which is really a message sent from the PeopleSoft application via email. In-app or push notification is what it used to be called. Now we're calling it in-app. Messages that are displayed as actions or alerts in the notifications panel on a homepage within the PeopleSoft application. And of course, text and SMS. It's a message sent from the application via text or SMS. So those are the different delivery methods for all the different types of notifications that we have. And I highlighted the ones we're going to focus on today. So the ones at the top, we may mention them somewhat, but the focus for Notification Composer is on email, in-app, and text, SMS. All right, so setting the stage, where we've been. So just kind of a recap. I don't know how many people are newer to PeopleSoft or have been around as long as I have, since like 1995. But PeopleSoft version 1 was released in 1989. It was the first HRMS client server application. Now we call it HCM. And of course, it expanded the product range to financials, manufacturing, distribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason why I'm saying that is PeopleSoft has been around a long time, and notification technology has really evolved, since the 1990s. And I tried to put a little road of what people tools and what technology has been made available in the PeopleSoft application since inception. And some of these, I don't know the exact, since it was so long ago and nobody could remember. I asked multiple questions. Well, which tools, release did this come in? We used to do things like People Tools, 5.5 and all these other things, and then we moved to kind of everything was 8 dot something. So basically, trigger business events was in People Tools 4.x in the 1990s. Workflow email notifications, same thing in the 1990s. Multi-channel framework in 8.4.2 in 2002. Push notifications in 8.5.6 in 2017. Text and SMS support came in PeopleTools 8.5.7 in 2019. The notification name and configuration was in 8.5.8 in 2019. Actions and alerts on the homepage in 8.5.9 in 2021. And Fluid Notify in PeopleTools 8.6.0 in 2022. And then in PeopleTools 8.6.1, which is available on cloud, we're basically harmonizing the classic Notify to make it look like what Fluid Notify does in 8.6.0 to make it a little bit more consistent. So this is a lot of technologies. So as a result, over time, we used to be on the release model. We had, release 5, release 8, 8.4, 9.0, 9.1, 9.2, et cetera. Until we got on the 9.2, we were on the release schedule that required a customer to do an upgrade with continuous delivery. Now at least we're on 9. All of our customers, for the most part, are on the same code line. But what this has led to, I like to call it a Frankenstein approach is that, because of PeopleTools constantly delivering new technology around configuration, we would rush to adopt things in the different releases. And then, instead of going back as PeopleTools was delivering new functionality, we didn't redo every single notification. And that led to basically a hodgepodge, or Frankenstein approach, as I call it, of notifications. If you ask a customer, are you using trigger business events? They'll say, I don't know. Is it using this? Is it using that? Are you using any custom notifications for these things? They don't necessarily know, unless they have a developer, what it is, or what they're actually using from PeopleSoft. So that was one of the challenges that we tried to overcome with this massive new approach. So over time, we adopted different pieces of functionality and didn't go back and redo all of them to use the latest and greatest. And that led to a lot of inconsistencies across the application. And this is what the chart looks like. I tried to put together a diagram that kind of shows you, for lack of a better word, where everything is coming from in the application. And this assumes like an 858 level, because an 858 trigger business events had the ability to go through PeopleTools notification configuration. So this doesn't go all the way back and show you everything, but this is kind of from 858 onwards. This is what the picture looks like today prior to Notification Composer. So some things go through PeopleTools notification configuration. Some things issue in-app notifications directly, text messages directly, email directly. It's all over the place. We have two different types of usage of approvals in FSCM, and HCM is not using PeopleTools notification configuration for AWE, but FSCM is. So we have a mix not only within the application, but across pillars as well. And this was the problem that we had, that we faced, and why we embarked on this this new approach. And we'll dig into more about this in a few minutes. Also, about where we've been is work list. I'm sure many of you know what that is, but if you don't, it's a way of tracking a task or an action item a user or group of users needs to perform. We generate them from approvals, or they can be generated from approvals. You can generate them from trigger business events. Basically, it can define a workflow path or steps defined for a PeopleSoft transaction using trigger business events. And I already mentioned AWE, but in the setup of AWE, you have the ability to say, okay, we'll also send a work list item when an event occurs, like somebody submits something for approval and it's routed, or the approver pushes it back. Those are actually events that can generate a work list entry. So that kind of gives you a bird's eye view of where we're coming from. And now let's talk about where we're going with this new approach. So most notifications in the application today are sent separately. If you want to send an email, you say, okay, send email, or you use one of those different technology I talked about in the last couple of slides, or send a text. So FSCM has the ability to send a text, from expenses. HCM never really provided that capability, but now with this new approach, we will be able to send text messages or an in-app notification. Moving forward, and this is the big thing to understand, is that everything will become a notification now, and it's up to the configuration to determine how the notification is received. Do you receive an email? Do you receive a text or an in-app notification? Most of the applications, when they use this new approach, you'll be sending one notification, and then the configuration, either at the admin level, and whether the admin allows personalization, all concepts we'll talk about in a few minutes, about how they receive it or if they receive it. Everything now with this approach is configuration based. So let's take a look at that diagram that I showed you, and basically what it does when we start using Notification Composer. So this approach takes out the Frankenstein that I talked about, is that long-term, we're not going to be using trigger business events anymore. We're not going to be using the push notifications API that was delivered a couple of releases ago, because now there's a new API starting in 8.5.9. Direct calls to push notifications, direct calls to workflow notifications. Emails through MCF will now be external users only. Everything else will go through Notification Composer. And with this approach, we're trying to harmonize financials and HCM, et cetera, that everything from AWE will go through Notification Composer. So it makes the diagram, a lot better. So if we look at the side by side, on the left, you have the current, which is as of 8.5.8, and then the future. So the diagram actually reduces quite a bit and is a lot more easier to follow. Also, actions and alerts. So basically, every notification has the ability to be an in-app notification, and that can be either an action or alert. These show in a notifications panel on the homepage, either expanded by default, which is what you see here, or can be minimized and accessible via the notification bell icon. And the term in-app, that's something new we started using in the last couple of tools releases. That's synonymous with push notifications. It's the same thing, it's just now we're trying to call it in-app instead of push notification. All right, so now let's get into what is Notification Composer. So this is an overview, and we're going to dig, way down over the next training sessions, but an overview to it. It's a new approach to notifications in PeopleSoft. It's a centralized framework to create and manage notifications. It's actually in enterprise components. So the development team that I showed you from financials, EC, and HCM, we all work together to build an enterprise component and place it into enterprise components. It integrates with PeopleTools notification configuration. So there's a PeopleTools layer, and then there's an application layer, which is in enterprise components. And we'll talk about what the differences are between those two layers in a few minutes. So high-level benefits, there's a lot more than this, but the main thing is that it provides visibility of all system notifications. It allows organization and grouping related notifications. It controls notifications through configuration. So those are the high-level benefits.
Russell, real quickly, we had one question that came in. It says, is this Notification Composer part of the PeopleTools release?
It is not. So basically, since it is, so PeopleTools has their functionality, and they've enhanced it over the last, since the 1990s. So this is in enterprise components. Now there is a PeopleTools minimum that I will go into a little bit later when we get into more of the finer details. But there are some minimum tools releases that a customer has to be on in order to use Notification Composer. But this all sits in enterprise components. The uptake of Notification Composer is within the application. So HCM is adopting Notification Composer, but the framework sits in enterprise components, so it's in every pillar database. There is one exception that we'll talk about towards the end of the 3-day training. So at a high level, it generates notifications. It creates a notification trigger using event mapping. It defines user lists of recipients. There's a lot of different ways. Some of these are roles, role queries, SQL, application classes. It allows for bind variables to be used as placeholders in notifications. So things like employee name, vendor name, things like that, where basically you have a template and you want to actually resolve what is actually shown in the notification with a bind variable, because it needs to be done at runtime. That's what a bind variable means for the people that have never heard that word before. It gives users configurable delivery methods and sources. So on the left-hand side, we have all the different delivery methods that I've talked about several times. And on the right, you have the message source. So the sources that we, and really it's notification source as well as email template, custom text, or message catalog. Those are the three things that we support today with Notification Composer. Let's pull up this diagram now that it's cleaned up a little bit. And I've added some things at the top because we have actually implemented Notification Composer in some of our common frameworks that are also in enterprise components. So AWE now integrates with Notification Composer. The questionnaire framework integrates with Notification Composer, and Activity Guide Composer integrates now with Notification Composer. So Notification Composer is the one that integrates with PeopleTools. And so, PeopleTools has a layer, as I mentioned before, and Enterprise Components now has a notification layer. And PeopleTools is the one that determines, okay, is the user going to get an in-app text or email? So we leverage all of the PeopleTools notification configuration in our setup of Notification Composer. So the applications will send a notification. Notification Composer will look at the setup, will integrate with PeopleTools and pass everything over in order for PeopleTools to send it to the identified recipients based on the configuration in PeopleTools. So I know it's a little complex, but we'll dig more into it in a few minutes. So hopefully everybody can understand. All right, so let's dig into the relationship between the different layers that I talked about. On the left-hand side, you have Notification Composer. On the right-hand side, PeopleTools notifications. And we're going to dig into this terminology in a second, but the ones to understand is on the left-hand side, you have a notification event, a notification ID, a business process, a notification handler, and then the message content, which includes a link, to the PeopleSoft page in the application. The message source, like that email template that I talked about, and the message itself, whether it's going to go in-app, email, or text. And also, this is where in Notification Composer, we say, well, what's the PeopleTools notification name? So this is what links together the two layers, is the PeopleTools notification name. So basically, when a notification name is specified for a notification, in Notification Composer, that's how PeopleTools knows what to do with it, because you configure the notification name in PeopleTools. You configure things about whether the notification is mandatory or required, what the available delivery methods are, like in-app, email, text, whether it's enabled by default, and whether personalization is actually allowed. So that's kind of how the two relate and what the different layers do. And the common piece is notification name. That's the main thing to understand. And we'll dig into some of these terms a little bit more to explain them. So now that we've done the overview, I wanted to show a little bit more about the benefits of this approach. So some of this has already been talked about, but basically consistency. System-generated notifications will now use the same technology and overall approach throughout the application. That's our goal. It's going to happen over time. HCM is pretty much caught up now. We've delivered pretty much everything as of our next image. I think Federal was the last that we were doing. And FSCM is still working on some of their trigger business events. But consistency is what we're going for here, is everything will use the same technology. Visibility. Notifications have to be registered in Notification Composer. And they're grouped by business process and functional category, thereby increasing visibility and purpose within the application. So what's interesting about this one is that since everything has to be registered in a setup page in Notification Composer, it basically documents, for lack of a better word, everything that we have. There are notifications back from the 1990s that are buried in people code that are nowhere in the people books. at all. Sometimes a customer doesn't even know about them because they were done so long ago. So basically, now going forward, everything will be found in the setup pages. All the different business processes, all the different notifications that a customer can enable or disable. All of that makes the visibility, a much better approach. Configurability. This was the biggest complaint we had from a lot of customers, is that in the past, for trigger business events, if you didn't want to use the trigger business event, a developer had to go into Application Designer and disable it, or they had to change the people code to comment it out. That's not a good approach. PeopleTools added on an additional layer that allowed you to put trigger business event through their notification configuration, but we still had, there were some problems with that. That resulted in duplicate notifications, one from trigger business event and one if you actually defined it to go through the PeopleTools notification configuration. You still couldn't completely turn it off. So this approach solves that, is now everything goes through configuration. So within notification groups, yes, go ahead. Was there a question? Okay, if you're not asking a question, please make sure you go on mute. Notifications can be enabled or disabled through configuration. Within the groups, organizations can choose the available delivery methods, whether mandatory, required, and whether recipients can personalize. Organizations can override the system-generated notifications with their own notification. That is a huge improvement as well, is that if a customer wanted to change something about it, typically they had to modify people code or modify our objects, delivered objects, in order to do that. So the configuration approach now basically allows them to create a new notification ID that we'll talk about in a little bit and use that instead of what PeopleSoft delivers, without actually changing, what PeopleSoft delivers, which is fantastic. Personalization. So with this new approach, basically, if the admin says, yes, the user can personalize this notification, then every notification now that goes through Notification Composer could be personalized by the user. If recipients can personalize, they can choose which notifications they receive, if it's not mandatory, and how they receive the notification. So as I mentioned before, everything now becomes a notification. The admin and or the end user, if they can personalize, decide the delivery method. Do you receive an email? Do you receive an in-app? Do you receive a text? All that now is configuration based. And another big advantage is create your own. So basically, the applications, whether it's HCM, financials, ELM, et cetera, we're going through converting a lot of our notifications, and we may not convert everything, which we'll talk about in the part 3 from a support perspective, so you're aware. A customer can create their own. So with this new framework, a customer using event mapping and the configuration can actually create a brand new notification. Will generate event mapping, and it will trigger a notification in the application. So that's a big improvement over what we have today. All right, so I've thrown around a lot of different terms. I think this is the last part that will last the next 15 minutes. To kind of everything you need to know about some of the terms that I have talked about, or terms I will be talking about in the next 2 parts. The biggest one to understand, I use the word system generated. So there's some reasons why this is important to understand. So system versus one-time ad hoc notifications. So system generated is based on an event that happens in the application. When the event occurs, the system automatically sends a notification to a recipient. So that's what system generated basically means in this context. Examples of these, which generate a system generated notification: an expense report submitted for approval, promotion request by a manager, address change by an employee, purchase requisition submitted, benefit statement available after open enrollment ends. These are all system generated based on something happening in the application. Those are just a couple of examples. There's thousands of these in the application. One time or ad hoc. Yes.
Russ, there is a question. Is Notification Composer email modes support full integration with the latest version of Microsoft Outlook?
It depends on what you mean by support. I mean, we send an email, so I'm not quite sure what that question really means. So basically, Outlook, we send an email from PeopleTools through multi-channel framework calls. So multi-channel framework, supports a lot of different email. So if it doesn't support it, it's the first I've heard of that. So we may need to table that, and I'll find out from PeopleTools. But is there more clarity that's needed there? Because I don't know that I necessarily understand it.
Vonna, is there anything else that you wanted to put on that or ask on that?
Yeah, it's not really a Notification Composer question. We support email, so whatever tool supports for email, we support. It just sends an email, so it should be fine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's Gmail, Outlook, whatever. I mean, we send an email. So I haven't heard of any issues with the latest version of Outlook. Okay, so one-time or ad hoc purpose based on user choice. So basically, the thing to know about one-time or ad hoc is that it's really typically a user chooses to notify someone. It's not the system. It's, somebody is in the application and maybe, hits a button or a link or, who knows what to actually send a notification that they want to send. It's not the system generating it based on an event. The user is determining, oh, I want to send this to, so-and-so. Some examples are a manager sends a direct report an email to say, hey, go complete your onboarding task. Recruiter emails a link to the hiring manager to review an applicant. The payables manager notifies the payables clerk of incomplete vouchers on a work center. So those are examples where a user says, oh, I want to send a notification. These are a couple of examples of what one-time ad hoc is. And hopefully you can see the comparison between the two, what system generated versus one-time or ad hoc. Now, you may be asking, okay, well, why are we making such a big deal about this? Well, the important thing is that the application teams are focused on converting system-generated notifications to the Notification Composer approach. That's what we're starting with. And we can't always, because the user is determining, who the recipient is. Only the sender knows the reason, why they're sending a notification. Notification Composer is all about, okay, well, the system is generating this. Here's the recipients that the application figures out, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it's not typically a good candidate to be Notification Composer enabled. We do have some exceptions that we'll talk about, but in general, only the sender knows the purpose, only the sender knows the recipients. The sender wants to ensure the user receives the notification. And if you use Notification Composer, everything is configuration based. You don't know how they're going to get it or if they're going to get it, if they can personalize. That's why sometimes ad hoc and one-time notifications don't make sense, to go through Notification Composer. All right. So system-generated notifications will utilize the Notification Composer approach. This includes all AWE approvals and their events. So pushback is now a notification event, deny, route for approval, etc. Trigger business events. I put the word select. The trigger business event has the ability to send an email. It has the ability to send workflow notifications. And we have these throughout the application in a lot of different key areas. And the reason why we have select is a lot of these things are really, really old, from the late 80s, 90s, et cetera. A lot of customers don't even really know about them. We didn't want to spend a bunch of time converting every single trigger business event only to find out nobody's going to use it, or doesn't even know about it and they don't need it. So we reviewed all of our TBEs and tried to focus in on the ones either that we know customers are using or are for some of the products that we're still investing in heavily in the application. Also, application frameworks that have different types of events are also being modified, to use Notification Composer. So on the one-time and ad hoc notification side, most of those will not use Notification Composer. The one exception right now is in HCM. So HCM has HR notifications, which is an ad hoc notification framework. The framework will provide the ability to configure by category whether Notification Composer is being utilized or not. And the main reason and why it's an exception is that, this particular framework also allows you to schedule things on a recurring basis or for a particular purpose. So maybe, using HR notifications, you want to have a recurring notification about timesheets. Submit your timesheets. It's the end of the month. Maybe you want to have a recurring notification about submitting expenses because it's quarter end or year end. Those are things that are quantifiable, right? Is that that, okay, well, this is expense reminders. I could set up a category specific, to that. I can figure out who the recipients are, and I could actually tell the user the purpose. So therefore, maybe they might be able to personalize. I don't need these timesheet reminders. I have my own reminders. So that's why, not every ad hoc notification, can use Notification Composer, which is why this framework now allows the customer to choose. If you define things like the timesheet reminders for a specific purpose, maybe it does make sense to use Notification Composer. But if it's truly ad hoc, where it's, for a one-time need or one-time purpose, those probably would not make sense, to go through Notification Composer. So the customer has the flexibility. So as of today, this is the one exception. We're looking at ELM because it also has ad hoc notifications. At this point, we have not determined whether we're going to adopt Notification Composer in ad hoc notifications or not in ELM. A little bit more about the terminology. So I mentioned some of these when I showed the relationship between PeopleTools and Notification Composer. Notification event. This is an event that occurs within the context of a PeopleSoft transaction that triggers a notification. For example, I mentioned some of these already. Submitting an expense report may trigger an approval notification to a manager. Adopting a baby may trigger a notification to an administrator, like if the employee goes through life events and self-service. Those are examples of notification events. Notification name. This is kind of a confusing concept. PeopleTools named it this way, and we had lots of discussion. What does this mean? Should it be called something else? And they changed it, 3 or 4 times, and finally it was like, okay, we're just going to leave it alone. So it's notification name. So the thing to understand about this can be one or more notification events. So one or more notification events can map to the same notification name. And typically a notification name, if it has multiple notification events, means that it shares something in common. Common attributes like the purpose of the notification, the PeopleSoft transaction that generates it, the notification delivery method, and the level of personalization. Those are all things that you can control at the group level, which is really the notification name. Then there's business process. This was new with the approach. It's kind of the same thing that we did with trigger business events. Everything kind of has a business process. We thought this was really good because it gives an extra layer of being able to say, what business process this notification event belongs to. So typically it's the name of the business or transactional area where a notification event occurred. Some examples include job data changes, name changes, address changes. Those are all examples of business processes that we delivered in HCM. Functional category. This is on the PeopleTool side, and it's logical groupings of notification names and potentially multiple business processes for an end user, such as benefit details, personal details, payroll, expenses. So each one of these is other than the notification event, is a grouping or organization attribute. So you can group things by notification name. You can group things within a business process. And then what ties it all together on the PeopleTool side is a grouping of notification names by a functional category. So it's really, the way this all works together is it helps the customer as well as the application organize things better and help find things in the application better. I mentioned the visibility a while back in one of the slides. These things actually allow the customer or you as a support person to actually find things, find notifications that are grouped together, or notifications for a business process or by a particular functional category. So that's why it was important with this approach to improve visibility and help group and organize things better. All right, digging more a little bit into some of those things that I just talked about. On the right-hand side, this is a different view of what I said before about how Notification Composer integrates, with PeopleTools. It's all through the notification name. In Notification Composer, just so there's no misunderstanding, we decided to call it PeopleTools notification name, because it gets confusing when you have two different layers. You have the app layer, which is Notification Composer, and then you have the technology layer, which is PeopleTools. But the notification name on the PeopleTools side, we call it PeopleTools notification name in Notification Composer. So it's obvious that it's the same thing. So events in the application that trigger notifications are notification events. Notification events are categorized by business process. Notification content will be defined when the notification is composed in the application. A lot of times we execute people code and pull things from the transaction. Maybe it's an employee ID, maybe it's a vendor ID, etc. So the notification content is something that we get from the application so that we can include it in the email or in-app or text that's sent to the recipient. We have some content that is formatted. So there's things like email templates, message catalog text, static text, or text defined dynamically by the application. Notification recipients are determined either by a user list or by application logic. So we have two different ways that we can do things. You can either define the user list through the different methods that I mentioned before, like roles, role queries, etc., or by application logic. Like maybe the application figures out, who's in a particular department, who's in a particular pay group, who's in a particular business unit. Maybe those are things that notification is being sent to. The application, figures that out based on the event and or other configuration. Notification names tie together the attributes between Notification Composer and PeopleTools, and that's what that diagram on the right is trying to depict. All right, so now let's take a use case where we start using some of these terms so it helps kind of bring it together a little bit more. For people that are not in the HCM organization, hopefully this will resonate. Life events is where it's a self-service transaction that an employee can say, hey, I'm getting married, I'm having a baby, I'm getting divorced, et cetera, et cetera. and customers can create their own life events. And typically when you go through a life event, there are certain things that happens. Sometimes you're able to, change your benefits, or, other things may happen as a result of your life event, where you're letting the employer or the organization know, hey, I did this, this, and this. So that's what life events is. So within life events business process, there are multiple notification events that occur in the application. So if the employee went in and entered a life event, the administrator is notified when an employee starts a life event, whether that's getting married, baby, etc. The administrator is notified when an employee cancels an in-progress life event. The administrator is notified when an approval is needed, when required documentation to support the event must be verified. Like the employee may be required to attach their marriage certificate if they say they're getting married, or if they're adopting a baby, they have to attach the adoption papers for proof that they're eligible for this particular life event. The employee is notified when an administrator pushes back an approval, like maybe they forgot to add that documentation that I just talked about, and they say, okay, well, you didn't add this, you got to correct it before I can approve it. So those are just a couple examples of notification events in life events. All right, so let's take it a step further. So on the far left in the benefits application, we have a life event status. You start the marriage event, you cancel the marriage event. Then you have approval events for documents. You have route for approval, pushback, deny, on final approval. Those are all in AWE. And now you can see how that maps in Notification Composer using some of this terminology. Is the notification event for start marriage event is start marriage notification to admin. Cancel marriage event is cancel marriage notification to admin. And the same thing, you can read through them. I won't go through every one, but route for approval, pushback, deny, on final approval. Those are all defined events in Notification Composer. And then you can see how these map together in the business process called life events. All of these are mapped to this business process because this is where it's triggered. All right, now taking it a step further. The notification events in Notification Composer, the ones I just talked about, plus I added a few more, map to a notification name. You specify the PeopleTools notification name on the Notification Composer side, and that's, of course, the notification name on the PeopleTools side. So you can see how things kind of are grouped together. Is that life events admin is the name of one of our notification names in HCM, and it has two notification events going to it. W-2 availability only has one going to payroll tax forms, right? And then two notification names are grouped together in a functional category because they relate to benefit details. So that should show you, hopefully, the relationship and what these terms mean and examples of how they can be classified, organized, categorized, etc.
So Russell, real quickly, we had another question come in.
Okay.
It says Campus Solutions currently has notification processes that use people code. Examples, mail, send. Will these be affected at all? Is it recommended to change these processes to use this new Notification Composer?
Okay, it's a good question. We're covering that in part 3. Campus is still determining what they're going to do with Notification Composer. And they have used what's called EOEN, which is a technical name for Event and Notification Framework. It's a separate thing. And we're looking at how we merge what they do with this particular approach so that we use the same thing across HCM, ELM, financials, etc. So they're in the process of determining how they're going to adopt Notification Composer. So to answer your question, most things that are system generated on the campus side eventually will be converted to use Notification Composer. That's kind of what we talked about in a meeting with campus development, but they have not delivered anything yet, and they're light on resources. They're going to be a little bit behind the rest of us, but we'll talk about the differences across pillars in part 3. All right, I believe that this is the last slide of the day. I'm sure everybody's breathing a sigh of relief. How the pieces fit together. I've talked about a lot of this already. So you have defined the notification event, compose notification, and we'll show some of these transactions that make up each one of these things in part 2. And then people tools, the notification administration. You have the notification name, the available delivery methods, the functional category, whether it's mandatory, whether the user can personalize. And then you have my preferences, which is where the end user, based on the configuration, can say, based on the configuration, oh, I want to, for this particular notification name, I want an email, I want a text, or I don't want this notification at all. So that's kind of at a bird's eye view of how all the pieces fit together. And the first thing we do in part 2 next Thursday is to walk through each one of these setup pages one by one, so that you can see them, ask questions, etc.